Welcome to the show. I'm Zach,
I'm Jake.
and this is the It's Too Easy podcast. The Just to get you started a little bit to get to know us is I'm Zach. This is my brother Jake, and we grew up playing all kinds of sports, you name it, whether it was soccer, baseball, football, basketball. Even hit the range at golfing with our dad once in a while. And as we stuck with it, I particularly like basketball and football. Pretty knowledgeable about it, and have a lot of sports knowledge stored up in my head for no reason. And with that, I get a lot of people asking me for picks on who to bet for different games, what teams that I like, and a lot of futures about who I think is going to win for NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, you name it. So, a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today is the NFL and then a lot of what we saw in college football this weekend. So, Jake, what stood out to you about college football this week? What teams looked good? What teams didn't look good? What do you expect from the season?
Yeah, so for this season, I was really looking for that top 10, that top 15, kind of see how those teams looked. The teams that really impressed me were Florida State. Last season, they kind of had like a little bit of a rocky roller coaster of a season, so I was really looking forward to see how they'd play against LSU and kind of learned a lot about that LSU team and Brian Kelly not quite having exactly what they thought they were going to have. Um, Clemson showed a little bit of chink in their armor without their quarterback and having to adjust to a new football team really. And their defense still looks solid, but is the offense going to be able to kind of rally around them and play? Was a huge thing that I saw. And then Utah from the Pac-12 without their quarterback looked pretty solid on defense. They were able to string together a couple drives on offense that looked pretty impressive, but I don't think they're going to quite have that offensive firepower that they're going to have last year with their tight end, who's now in Buffalo. I can't remember what his name was. Kincaid, I
Dalton
think.
Kincaid. Yep.
Yeah.
Guy's a
And
stud.
then, other than that, USC had a really solid first couple weeks. So obviously, with Caleb Williams, they're a big team to look out for. My Oregon Ducks took care of business, but it was against not very worthy teams. So I'm
Portland State.
looking forward to seeing exactly how this next week goes and how we match up against Texas Tech away. Because for the Ducks, a lot of these younger guys are going to need some experience away, and going against one of our old quarterbacks is going to be a ride for us. But what did you
Mhm.
think was the most interesting thing in some of the teams that really stood out to you this week in college football, Zach?
Yeah, so again, that Clemson was a huge standout because everyone was hyping up Cade Klubnik going into the season, and I was there at the game in the Duke crowd. Half of it was Clemson, so I kind of expected Clemson to run away with it from the get go, and missing a field goal low. It looked like it hit the lineman in the back of the head. It didn't even get off the ground. Ended up going down the field, missed another field goal. Two fumbles at the goal line, getting down to the 10-yard line by running it, and then throwing three incomplete passes doesn't help. And then there was a late interception that kind of sealed the deal. But their defense looked pretty solid. Riley Leonard had a breakaway 44-yard run for a touchdown, I think it was. So Duke looks pretty good. I know they were 9-4 last year. Pretty scary team to play at home, so that'll be interesting to see how they do with a tough schedule coming up. Washington obviously started slow. We had talked about that, but Michael Penix Jr. I expect to see him in the Heisman race this year if they can stay 1-2 losses, being whether it's Oregon or USC or Utah, whoever it is that they're playing. Oregon State looked pretty good with DJ as well. I was interested to watch the Texas game. They started pretty slow against Rice, but ended up pulling it together in the second half. I think Quinn Ewers is going to do a good job over there. Sarkeesian's obviously a good coach.
Do you
And
think
then
he's going to
Jalen
be the
Milrow.
mentor? Do you think that Quinn is going to be the mentor for Arch? Because I think Arch is listed as third on the depth chart right now, but I'm not
Yeah,
not too sure.
I think that Quinn will probably play the entire season, assuming he has no setbacks, goes into the draft well. And I mean, he and Arch seem to be good friends, so I do think it will be a mentor role. But he better hope that he doesn't get hurt because I think if Arch gets a chance to play, he's not going to get his spot back. And that's a pretty talented wide receiver room he's got over there. Xavier Worthy obviously is probably going to be a first round pick next year as well. That's going to be an interesting matchup against Jalen Milrow in Alabama, who also started slow this week versus Middle Tennessee State, I think it was. But he ended up putting together a pretty solid game. Obviously, I think Saban's going to be ready for him after everyone was talking last year about them barely winning it on a field goal. I think Ewers had gotten hurt that game, if I'm not wrong. Um, I watched the Penn State game as well, and they took care of business against West Virginia. And that new QB, Drew Aller, I think was his name,
Mm-hmm.
is a stud. They got
Yep.
Singleton and one other running back that both were studs last year, so they could be
Yeah,
a team to watch.
that running back room is definitely dynamic in Penn State. We can definitely go through some of those running back rooms because you got Oregon State's got a pretty good running back room. Um,
Ohio
USC,
State,
USC
Ohio
still
State's got
Ohio
Travion
State.
Henderson. Yeah,
Yeah, and there's
yeah,
definitely the Bama and Georgia. They're always going to be able to run the ball no matter what with those guys up front. So it's going to be interesting to see kind
yeah.
of how those rooms develop.
Exactly. And so, going off of that, who do you expect to see in that college football playoff this year, and maybe the Heisman as well?
Well, it's pretty hard not to take Georgia in the top four. Obviously, coming off back-to-back wins, their team's just dynamic. Kirby's always got them ready to play. It seems like the explosiveness is always there. So I definitely think Georgia will be somewhere in the top four. Whether it may be one, two, three, four, I'm not too sure. There could
They
be a
also
game
have a
in there
fairly
that they
easy
lose.
schedule.
Yeah, there could be
The
a game in
schedule,
there
yeah.
that they do lose, but I think it's not something they wouldn't be able to bounce back from. They kind of have that experience now of being in the top that they know what it takes to be at that level and to be the best. So they kind of have set the bar for themselves, and I think that for Georgia, it's going to be based on how does everybody play up to their level. I wasn't too impressed with Ohio State and Penn State. Like I do think they have a shot to get in there, but I think that they are going to take a lot of development throughout the season. And whether or not you can keep away from losing two games throughout that development in the season is going to be tough, with especially some of the games that they have to play away and at home. And as it gets closer to December, it gets colder in those areas. So, it's all a big question mark, some of those games. You never know going into Minnesota in November how you're going to play. But
Mhm.
I think definitely we have to look out for an Ohio State or Penn State from the Big Ten.
No,
Pac-12 is
Michigan.
abs. Yeah, no Michigan. I think that Michigan is a little bit overrated. I think that a lot of their game is kind of based around possession and just controlling the game. And I think that's a really good way to play. But in college football, a lot of it's more explosive than that NFL style of controlled run the ball, run the clock. And now with the clock rule, I don't think it's going to really take too much of an effect. Um,
Hmm.
I just don't see Michigan wiping the floor with everybody. I see them also losing a game in there. I think they would be one of those teams that's like one loss up in the air. May get in, may not get in. You never know. But they're definitely a top 10 team. They definitely have the star power. And
Any underdogs that you're thinking have a chance?
other than those two, out of the not in the top five right now, I think after watching USC these first 2 weeks, it's kind of hard not to have them in there, just because of Caleb Williams and the explosiveness that offense brings. I had no idea who Zachariah Branch was until I watched that first game, and dude had like Christian McCaffrey level all-purpose yards, and I was just like jaw dropped. The dude was insane. I'm not looking forward to us playing them this year because some corner on Oregon's going to have to cover him, and that's going to be
Yeah.
near impossible.
And then on the
So I
opposite side,
really,
you got Dorian Singer as well. So Singer looked pretty
yeah,
good.
and Mario Williams is still there too, right? So I mean,
Yep,
they
he
have a
is.
trio of wide receivers out there now with 4.3, 4.4 speed that anybody is going to have trouble covering.
Hmm.
And then other than USC, there's I think pretty much the top 10's wide open. Two is Michigan right now. Who's third?
Ohio
Alabama,
State. Oh,
And then
Alabama.
Ohio
Yeah.
State's fifth.
Okay.
Who we got, and Florida State all the way up to four is what they got right now.
Should take LSU
I
down
don't
handily. Yeah.
necessarily think Florida State should be a top five team yet, but it's if they're put there now with having being in the ACC, it's going to be tough not to have them in there. I think towards the end, because unless there's a game somewhere in there that they just don't win, I think LSU is going to be a heavier SEC team and probably one of the tougher teams that they're going to play on their schedule. I don't know if they played Duke this year, but Duke looked pretty impressive, so maybe that
Yeah.
they would
Not
take
sure
it to
about
them.
that. I know they have Florida, Clemson, I think, but yeah, I'm not too sure about the rest of it.
So yeah, that's definitely something to be on the lookout for, is Florida State there. But I think pretty much that top 10 is wide open for the taking. You're going to have those couple solid teams. I think Bama, is going to be open to losing a game again somewhere, whether it be against Georgia or an Auburn or, some sort of, big game that someone just wants Bama. There's going
Yeah,
to be,
this week
I
with
think,
Texas, maybe we'll see.
yeah,
They
you
might
never
want some
know.
revenge. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like nowadays there are teams that just have that week where they come ready to play Bama, and they
Mhm.
lose one and then somehow find a way to win them all out and get into the top four. Nick Saban, great coaching, obviously, but yeah, I'd like to see Bama back in there, but I don't know how it's going to fare if they have to play Georgia twice. So that's the biggest
Mhm.
thing.
Makes sense. I don't think they played Georgia this year, but they would have to obviously play in the championship game.
Yeah. So, oh yeah. So they played last year. They wouldn't play this year. But in the championship game, that's going to dictate a lot for that college playoff, anyways. So that's going to be a big thing.
Mhm.
I don't know. How about you? Who do you think is going to be the top four going into the playoff?
So I can't go against Georgia just because they're back to back. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as they're doing that, I'm going to trust Kirby with what he's got going on. Carson Beck looked good in the first game. Two, I'm actually going to go opposite of you. I think I'm going to stick with Michigan because Blake Corum was the Heisman front runner up until he got hurt in week 10 or 11, I think it was last year. He's back and healthy. They got Donovan Edwards, I believe, still. JJ McCarthy looked pretty solid again, even though it was a 30-3 win, I think, versus East Carolina. No Harbaugh for the first couple weeks, so I think they'll get the job done, but stick around at least long enough to face a potential. I think Penn State will be the competition for them this year. I don't think Ohio State's going to be as good. Um, that third spot, I'm thinking I really like Notre Dame this year. So I love
Okay.
Sam Hartman last year with Wake Forest, and they're a huge sleeper. They're predicted 8.5 wins this season. Hammered the over. I know they have NC State. They're coming to town this week, and they always have a hard time in Raleigh. But Audric Estime's back at running back for Notre Dame. Sam Hartman's a beast. Their defense is always solid. Yeah, last year after the first couple games for Marcus Freeman, losing obviously to Marshall, and I think right before that Ohio State, they kept it close, 21-10, I think. They're going to have Ohio State again in a couple weeks. I don't think Ohio State looks phenomenal, but Notre Dame will then have Clemson, who again didn't look great, and USC at the end of the year is going to be probably the hardest matchup that they're going to have. And then with the fourth spot, I'm hoping with the last year of the Pac-12 that a Pac-12 team makes it. I don't think Oregon's going to be quite as good, but I do think that they'll probably reach that 10-win, 11-win mark. But I'm thinking it's going to be up between Washington and USC. And I'm thinking that Washington probably ends up beating USC because they're going to have a tough road with Utah, Oregon State, Oregon, Colorado, Notre Dame, UCLA, all in like a 5-6 week span. So one of those I think they have to lose. Oregon's obviously in Autzen, so it's hard to go into Autzen. So I could see Oregon winning that one against SC. But I'm going to say Washington beats them, and then USC gets revenge in the Pac-12 championship game and makes it into that fourth spot this year, just to end off the Pac-12 in decent fashion. I do think a Michigan Notre Dame bowl would be very fun because it's two teams with solid QBs that can both run the ball, have good defenses.
Right on. Yeah,
But
I think that's a solid
yeah,
top four. Notre Dame's definitely a sleeper, but their schedule is definitely, this year is not going to make it easy on them either. So,
hmm
I think if they definitely win all their games, they can be in there for sure. And we could see them
yeah,
battling maybe Michigan or Georgia in the playoff, which would be crazy.
yeah,
So
that'd
let's
be a
talk a
fun
little
game.
bit about some of these games this week then. I know you got a couple of the games that you're looking at throwing money on. Um, some of the games not as interesting, obviously, with some of the teams that aren't maybe as up to par as the top 25 or top 50 teams. There are definitely some interesting games in there. So why don't you go through and kind of give us some of your picks for the week?
Yeah, so starting where we left off, Notre Dame is coming in to play NC State this week, and they're 7 point favorites. And NC State didn't look impressive against UConn. Notre Dame's been rolling. Obviously, I love Sam Hartman. I just love the run game with Audric Estime and the defense. So I got them covering the -7 spread. Utah, I think Cam Rising's supposed to be back this week, and they're going into Baylor, who I believe lost to like Texas State by 11 this week. And so I'm thinking Utah should have no problem covering the 6 or 6.5 point spread that I saw. Oregon obviously just put up 80 points, and they're playing Texas Tech. Tyler Shuck was the backup. He was the backup for a reason. So I don't think him coming out with Texas Tech is going to do any damage. I think Oregon covers those 6.5 points. Obviously, the Pac-12 looked phenomenal, 13-0 so far, which is the first time that's happened. I loved Washington State last week. I think they were like 6-point favorites and won by 25. They're playing as underdogs. I believe it's at home against Wisconsin. Not a fan of Tanner Mordecai. I mean, he's all right, but I don't think he's anything special. I actually prefer Ward, the QB for Washington State. So I'm liking them plus 6.5. I also like them on the money line. And then one of the games that I'm very interested to see is Tulane and Ole Miss because the Green Wave took down SC in the bowl game last year. They got
Yep.
the same guy back. He went 14 to 15. I think it's Michael Pratt or something Pratt, but he went 14 to 15, 300 yards, a couple scores, and they rolled through their competition this week at home against Ole Miss. I know Jackson Dart looked phenomenal. I think he had 4 touchdown passes to the same receiver. They put up 73.
And they're
But I
not
do like
even a passing team, that team, right? Ole Miss, they're
Yeah,
known for running the
they like
ball.
to run it. They got Quinshawn Judkins, who's an absolute unit, and I don't think Tulane's going to be able to stop him. I do think Jackson Dart has a couple errors where maybe there's a tip pass or a bad ball gets picked off, goes the other way, and helps swing it at least in Tulane's favor, at least to cover, if not potentially win that game at home as well. They were ranked 24th, I think, when they played SC, and I think they're still ranked right now, and they look pretty good. And then I'm excited for the Texas and Alabama game. So to see where that one's at, the line being 7.5 is kind of interesting to me with how close it was last year. I don't think Alabama looked impressive enough to give them 7.5, but obviously Saban's going to have them ready to go. What about you? Any of the games standing out to you?
A lot of the games you talked about are the big ones for this week, which make a lot of sense. I think a lot of your picks make sense. Tulane to cover actually makes a lot of sense if they kind of bring that same explosiveness that they had last year. They got a lot of their guys back, so it makes sense that we'd take that. The Oklahoma State Arizona State game, I don't know. That's a big question mark for me. I'm definitely going to be tuning into that one because I wouldn't know where to even lay a bet on that one. So sometimes those ones are the most fun to watch because you're just like, I wouldn't even know where to start because both those teams look pretty rocky in week one. So I'd like to kind of see how they develop in week two.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then how about Colorado?
Yeah,
Man, talking about the Pac-12 looking
yeah.
good.
Everybody's talking about Dion online, but we don't talk about Dion. I mean, he is obviously the man. Him and Shador, they have that team looking like they're ready to be in the top 15, which is crazy after winning one game last season, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they went 12-1, I think, at Jackson State, and guy's a stud. But throwing for 500 in his first actual, Division 1 college football game was very impressive. I think he had 4 receivers with over 100 yards.
Yeah,
Travis Hunter obviously came out saying before the season he was going to win the Heisman, and he looked like he could possibly do it. I mean, if he keeps up a season looking like that, if Colorado keeps winning, he could get his name up there.
if
So
Shador
that
doesn't steal it from him.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the problem is everyone's going to give it to the QB.
Hmm.
But yeah, that'll be an interesting game against Nebraska. I'm thinking Colorado handles them, but Nebraska's defense put up a fight against Minnesota. I think only gave up 13, 10 in the last 5 minutes or something, and Minnesota got to come back there. But what is that? Rules over there coaching, I think, now back in
Hmm.
Nebraska. He's got that defense playing well. I think Nebraska's offense struggles, so I think Colorado ends up covering that 3, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it go the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think all these games, there's definitely a lot to watch this weekend from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. There's going to be football on all Saturday. But on top of that, this weekend is the opening weekend to the NFL,
Yes, it
which I
is.
know you are
Let's go.
extremely excited about.
We are
So
excited.
let's kind of go into some of, well, one, let's talk about last year. Last year, a lot of people aren't going to know this, but you picked the Chiefs to play the Eagles in the Super Bowl and the Chiefs to win. And,
That is true.
that was something that you picked, I think, 2 months before the season started or so. So why don't you go a little bit into that, and then we can kind of segue into your picks for the season.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of people know that talk to me closely, but yeah, I had the Eagles from the start. I usually try and find a sleeper to get good odds to at least make it to the Super Bowl. They were 25-1, 13th odds. They ended the season before that 6-1. made the playoffs. Obviously, got spanked by the Buccaneers and Tom Brady. But I like what they did. They got back to the run game. They got Jalen Hurts comfortable. The offensive line was getting healthy. They made a huge trade to get A.J. Brown, who's a stud receiver and a wide receiver one. They had Devontae Smith. Goddard was there. Miles Sanders, not too shabby of a back. I personally love Hurts, so seeing him get going was great. Love Darius Slay. They added Bradbury. They added, the draft was great. I personally love Nakobe Dean. He didn't get much of a chance to shine last year as a backup, but this is going to be his year, I think. And then Jordan Davis up front as well. I just love the Eagles' offense, defense, and then I saw that they had an easy schedule. So going into the season, I predicted them 14-3, taking the one spot, and then with that one spot rolling all the way to the Super Bowl because it's hard to go into Philly and play. And that's exactly what happened. So I took that 25-1, and then they got to the Super Bowl, hedged it the other way, and yeah, the Chiefs won like I expected. It's Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. You can't really go against it. Juju was a solid number one, even though he gets a lot of crap. I think that's going to be one of the struggles for the Chiefs this year is they don't have a true one. I think they're going to stick with Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, maybe that they traded for, but I don't think that'll be enough for them this year.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna have a little bit more struggle on offense, and if Pat's still not quite 100% healthy from last year and kind of the beating that he took throughout the season, I think that he may slow down a little bit this year, and we may see their season end a little early in the playoffs.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot
you
of
never
competition
know.
in the AFC, so the
Yeah,
AFC
I
is
mean,
going to
you got the
be
guy above your head, right? I mean, they could end up playing them first, second round, depending on where the records end up, and that would be an easy, sometimes with the way things play out, it could be end up being an easy game for Buffalo. So
mhm.
it all depends on who gets injured, how the squad's looking, and how things are developing throughout the season.
Yeah, I'm not taking Buffalo this year because of the Madden curse. We got Josh Allen up there, but I do think a lot of the pressure is going to be off of them this year because last year they were favorites. This year I think they're sixth to win it all. Obviously, you got guys like Joe Burrow with the Bengals that are going to be right there. You got Tua's Dolphins. That team is stacked. Is Tua good enough to elevate them? Lamar finally has weapons, and he's an MVP. I mean, Trevor Lawrence was on the come up last year. Now he's got Calvin Ridley, Justin Herbert, obviously with the Chargers. Adding Kellen Moore to the offense is going to make it more pass heavy. So I'm expecting 5,000 yards from him this year. I think he had 4,700 last year. Healthy Mike Williams, healthy Keenan, and then Quentin Johnston's supposed to be a stud.
How do you
That'll be
think
a good game.
Eckler plays after all of kind of the turmoil in the running back rooms so far this offseason?
Yeah, so I ended up watching their game. Was it versus the Rams? I think preseason game one, and I saw him doing an interview, and he seemed content. I mean, nothing really going wrong there. I think he's obviously got to prove it again because he's got guys like Joshua Kelly trying to take those snaps from him, and he's just
Hmm.
such a dual threat that it's like as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be the guy, and he's going to get his money, but running backs obviously aren't going to get paid the 34 million a year that Bosa just got paid today.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. I mean, they got six other teams, seven other teams that I could see out in the AFC. I mean, the Jets got Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Dalvin Cook, and that defense was top five last year. They'll be phenomenal.
Hmm.
The Browns might be okay with Deshaun having Amari and Elijah Moore and their defense adding to it. I personally think Steelers are going to be great. Their defense is already top notch. Mike Tomlin never goes under 500. With TJ Watt healthy last year, I think they ended it like 6-1. Obviously, I think they're 7-4 with him, so I could see them winning 11 games and kind of fighting for a spot this year. Sean Payton is a winner, and having
Yeah.
him with Russell Wilson. I mean, it's no Nathaniel Hackett, who's a bum. He's going to let Russell Wilson get back out, be on the move, and do what he does. So there could be 10 teams fighting for a spot. Even I think personally the Titans might have a shot to win that division. I don't think the Jags are going to run away with it. I think they'll end up winning it by a game or two. But Ryan Tannehill is usually solid. Vrabel's a good coach. Derrick Henry, they win games by running it, and D Hop's a solid receiver. Even at
Yeah,
this
the
point.
Titans are always solid on both sides of the ball, whether through the trenches, especially. I mean, it just feels like they're always winning those wars. So they're always a team to look out for sure.
The NFC will be a little different. I
Hmm.
think it's three-headed monster: Eagles, Cowboys, Niners. Personally, I think Sam Darnold should get another shot. So I kind of am hoping. I don't wish injury on anyone, but Brock Purdy, if he goes down, I would love to see Sam Darnold get a chance to start to take over for the Niners, and I think he could lead them all the way to a championship if they give him that chance. He's got a good line. Obviously, there's a little bit of question mark this year, having lost one of their main guys, but yeah, I mean, you got Debo, you got Kittle, you got Ayuk, you got McCaffrey, Elijah
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell's probably going to get more snaps again this year, coming back healthy, and I mean, anyone can succeed with a decent line and some weapons, I think. So
Well, and with that defense, I mean that defense is number one. You know, as long as
yeah,
they now have Bosa for 5 years on lock. I'm sure they'll even find a way to restructure it a few years from now to open the salary
yeah,
cap. But for now, they're absolutely loaded. If they can find in their quarterback room somewhere who's going to be their long term guy. I think we kind of got an idea
I
that
think it's
Purdy may
Brock.
be
Yeah,
that guy. I mean, I
yeah,
think we kind of got that idea that Purdy is going to be their guy, but it's tough to tell because he's so young. You only got this small amount of games, a thin amount of competition, and with
yeah.
the
No one
best
knew what to expect
defense,
from him. Yeah,
yeah, with the best defense, the defense is also scoring. It's tough. It's sometimes tough to get a gauge on how good your offense is performing.
yeah. And then I mean,
Exactly.
best linebacker room in the NFL. I mean, Greenlaw, Fred, and they're both absolute studs. I think
And they're
their
up the
corners might
four
be
up
one of the
front
worst
aren't much
parts.
worse than that. So
Yeah, yeah, it's really going to be how well can the corners and safeties perform on that team because front seven is going to be incredible, and they got the
hmm
weapons on offense. So with that Division 2, the Rams, you don't really know what's going to happen with them bouncing back with Cup, Donald, Stafford. I don't expect too much from them. Cardinals are obviously tanking for Caleb, and the Seahawks snuck out 9 wins last year. I do like their offense with Smith and Jigba, Metcalf, Lockett, Kenneth Walker. I love Charbonnet and Bobo that both came from UCLA. They're both studs that I expect
yep.
to get some more action as the season goes on. But I don't really think Gino's that guy. He had a good season last year. He got his money, and we'll see if they can sneak in for a wild card again this year. It shouldn't be too hard in the
But
NFC.
Seattle on defense, I think, is going to be a force to reckon with this year. They kind of have structured that defense and got it kind of nailed down to where I think they're going to be able to play some good ball this year.
Yeah, they already were looking good last year. I mean, with as many assets as they got for Russell Wilson, they got 4 or 5 more years to keep building onto it. Was
Exactly.
it Witherspoon that they got this year out of the draft? Devin Witherspoon,
Yep.
I think it was him. Yeah, and they paid him. Yeah, that's going to be a good team, interesting team to watch, and they could make a run at it. But again, I don't think they're going to have much of a fight with even the Lions Vikings. Like, who's going to win that division? The Bears could be right there. I don't think that they're going to be as good as they need to this year, but maybe a couple years down the line they'll have a bright future with Fields. Getting DJ Moore is going to help.
I mean,
But
that
yeah,
NFC
the
West is
Vikings,
just
Lions.
stacked. So, I mean, having to go into LA isn't going to be any easy task either. I mean, obviously the Rams aren't going to be as good, but I mean, they're still going to have Stafford. If they can get a healthy Cup, they'll be a decent team.
Mhm. Yeah, and
So,
then it'll be interesting to see how Cam Akers does with an actual shot to run it this year.
hmm
Yeah, I mean,
running
Aaron
back
Donald
one.
said he was going to retire and didn't. Um, if Stafford can stay healthy, I mean, if not, is Stetson going to be able to win a game? I don't know. I doubt it, but
Yeah.
he looks solid in his first game, and the second and third not so much. But obviously, if you could put in a system that he was able to perform at Georgia, he could do it again.
And he kind of emulates Stafford, so at least they were drafting towards, a quarterback that can fit their system.
Yeah. So for
So,
the season, what are you expecting to see in the Super Bowl? Maybe AFC, NFC championships.
whew.
What teams do you think will be there?
Um, that's tough. Right now, I really like the Eagles. Like you said last year, they really just felt like they kind of had all the pieces, and they just really needed to put it together. And they really started to string the wins together. So I think that it's going to be. I don't think they're going to have as many wins during the season this season. I don't think they're going to be as awestruck if they lose during the season, but they're still going to be 12, 13, 14 wins. And I think that they're going to be able to build momentum towards the end of the season like they did last year. And they're going to know the steps that they need to take to get all the way back to the Super Bowl. So I do have the Eagles going back to the Super Bowl for sure this year in the NFC. For the AFC, I am still have a complete question mark.
Mhm.
I have no clue who I want to pick. I'm the three that I'm narrowing it down to right now are Cincinnati because I think Joe Burrow. I think that it's just kind of
Shiesty.
his time. It
Mhm.
feels like Joe Burrow. Like if it's not his time, it's going to be his time in the next couple of years because what Cincinnati's
Yeah.
building from what they've had in the past 5, 10 years it feels like they have something special over there. Other
Mhm.
than that, I really would like to see the Chargers go back. I think
Yep.
they built around Herbert. They finally paid that man, and he got a huge contract. So I think he's happy there. I think that the players trust him. I think that he's one of those quarterbacks that he fits, the quarterback role for them. He can move. He's got a crazy good arm, and he knows those players. He can connect with those guys. So I'm really looking for them to win at least a couple playoff games, but if not, try and get even further than that.
Yep.
Other than that, the other team that I had was Buffalo. I do think that the Bills have a good shot at going to the Super Bowl this year. They're going to have a lot of roadblocks in their own division, because just getting through the Jets and the Dolphins, but just
Dolphins.
by
Yeah.
themselves is going to be a challenge. But I think having that harder schedule is going to be able to leapfrog them above some of those other teams and give them that experience they need in the playoffs to get them to the Super Bowl. I don't know if they win the Super Bowl, but I think there's a good chance they get there. So
Mhm.
those are kind of my three teams for the AFC is Cincinnati, Buffalo, and then what was the last team I mentioned?
The
The
Chargers.
Chargers. I'd really like to see the Chargers. That one's a little bit of a long shot. That's why. But yeah, I think the Eagles will get it done in the NFC. I think the NFC is a little bit more clear cut. The picture is a little bit more obvious to what's going on there. It sucks that our
Who do you expect?
Cowboys aren't.
Who do you expect to challenge them? Is it
I'd
going to be the
like to see
Niners?
The Cowboys challenge again. Obviously, with us being pretty decent Cowboys fans, you're a huge Cowboy fan. That we'd like to
Jumping
see the
back inside
Cowboys
of the
go far.
podcast.
Yeah, it feels like it's been way too long since they've been able to break out and really win deep in the playoffs. They've always It feels like they've always had an 8-8 team, or 10-6 team, 12-4 team, and then they'll win a game in the playoffs, and then some crazy Des Bryant penalty will get called and it'll cost them the game, or something like that'll happen. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Dallas is able to challenge the Eagles in the long run for this season. But I just don't think in deep in the playoffs they're going to be able to get it done against some of those better NFC teams. And but we'll see kind of what the season beholds, and if Dak is going to be able to bring back that old Dak and just keep playing at his best level. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, speaking of that, I think Dak gets, obviously a lot of crap for 15 interceptions last year, but seven of them were off of receivers just tipping the ball straight to a defender. He
Yeah,
came off a broken
deflections.
finger. Yeah, came off a broken finger, and then he had some super ugly ones. But also, you have Kellen Moore running the offense for years, and a team that succeeds by running the ball, he just kept throwing it and throwing it and throwing it. And so
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see how Kellen does with the Chargers, who love to throw it with Herbie and obviously the weapons they have over there. I think that's a much better fit for them. We'll see how
It seems
McCarthy
like
does
the
running the play.
Chargers it seems like the Chargers are much more open to that Kellen Moore style of throwing on early downs.
Yeah,
Whereas the Cowboys have always played around that offensive line, so it always makes more sense to run it on early downs. And seeing the Cowboys make that shift and change, offensive coordinators, I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how they implement, the screen passes and short passes and stuff on early downs rather than trying to get the ball down the field or go over the middle on early downs to deflect, deflected
exactly.
passes or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's also going to be interesting to see how the tight ends step up with Schultz. Obviously, Walken ended up going to the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
Having Ferguson step in, having what is it, Schoonmaker out of Michigan is going to step in, and then Hendershot's still going to be back from last year. But I think it is going to be a huge advantage adding Brandon Cooks. I don't think it's enough to help put the Cowboys over the edge. I do think they need a little bit more depth in the defense, whether it's a linebacker with Overshown getting hurt, letting go of Cox. Um, obviously they don't have much linebacker depth. Corners are solid. Obviously, you got one of the best duos, if not the best duo, in Gilmore Diggs.
Yep.
But if Gallup can be healthy, it might be enough, I think, to push him over to the NFC Championship. Depending on matchups, I do expect to see the Niners and the Eagles rematching. And because of home field advantage, I did take the Niners this year. I don't know why. Maybe thinking Eagles have a little injuries or something going on. Maybe the defense isn't good enough. But I
Yeah, I
did
do
end up
think the
taking.
Niners will make it deep in the playoffs again. But I also want to, before we go too deep into those other things, I want to ask you how you think Brandon Cooks is going to fit into the Cowboys wide receiver room.
I don't. I think he'll be fine. He's been a 1,000-yard receiver, all but 2019, I think. So, he's had 8 seasons of it, basically Mike Evans stuff, where he goes in, he does what he needs to do, and I don't think it's the perfect fit. Like I said, I'd rather have Amari than Brandon Cooks as a Cowboy fan because the way the Eagles built a 1A, 1B receiver with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, I think you need that to win a Super
Yeah.
Bowl unless you have a Kelsey on your team. Then you don't necessarily need that. But the Cowboys don't have that. So I don't think CD's really a 1A receiver. I think he's a 1B slot receiver. Obviously, he can do more than that. He had, 1,400 yards last year. He'll
Mm-hmm.
probably do it again this year. Cooks will probably have 1,000. And then, you have Gallup, who usually is a big play guy, but he's also a big target. So he could fill in that, him and Cooks together could fill in that Coop kind of role. If Gallup looks healthy, he makes the big plays. But watching in the last few years, he also usually has a problem catching passes. He tips a lot of balls. CD's had an issue with that here and there. So it will be interesting to see how they do. If they can match up with the Panthers or Saints, maybe Falcons, whoever wins that division, Lions, Seahawks, I think they'd have a chance, obviously, at the NFC Championship. If it ends up being the Eagles or Niners before that, I think they get wiped out.
Yeah.
And then it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. I do expect Dak to have a great season, bouncing back, getting back a little bit to the run game, but also having more weapons and hopefully less drops because he was thrown to Tolbert last year as a number 2 and a hurt Gallup. So I think the interceptions will be coming back down, and he'll be possibly, I don't know about MVP conversation top 5, but maybe at least an MVP kind of season if the team wins the division. I think the Eagles and them will both put up about 12, 13 wins. So it'll
Okay.
be a battle.
There we go. Okay,
Yeah.
so now we can kind of segue towards your picks for each division, because I know you have picks for your winning each division, and amount of wins,
Mhm.
amount of losses. I don't think we need to focus as much on that, but let's focus on
Yeah.
your winners for the divisions, and then we'll do NFC, AFC Championship, and then Super Bowl, and then from there we can kind of segue into UFC.
Okay. Yeah.
All
Perfect.
right.
So this year, you want to just give me a division? And I'll tell you my thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure. Let's start with the NFC West.
Okay, so the NFC West, I think, should be a cakewalk. Obviously, I think Niners could potentially go, 15 wins, 15-2. I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Steelers upset in that Week 1 matchup going into Pittsburgh. I think it will be a great game. I'm not necessarily touching the line, but it might be a game that I live bet because
Mm-hmm.
the Steelers are going to be tough. Seahawks, I think, will probably make that wild card spot. I don't think it's going to be too tough for them to do that.
Yep.
Uh, Interested to see how the Rams bounce back, and Cardinals are tanking for Caleb Williams. I think they're starting Josh Dobbs Week 1, so yeah,
There's
that
rumors
shouldn't be.
that Caleb Williams may come back to SC for another year if the Cardinals decide to tank. So we'll see kind of how that whole situation plays out.
Hey, it could work out for the Cardinals. They could go Marvin Harrison and then wait another year and get him the next year. So we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see how
true.
that goes. But yeah,
So
so
yeah,
Niners,
definitely
Seahawks.
Niners, maybe Seahawks in a wild card spot. Okay, and let's then move to the NFC South. That's a big question mark because the Falcons, Panthers, Buccaneers, and Saints. That I mean, last year that was a roller coaster of a division. So who do you have winning that
Yeah,
one?
I ended up going with the Panthers this year, and on paper, looking at it, I would love to tell you the Saints, and I think that they have the talent for it. I think Derek Carr is great. I think Olave is great. I think Kamara is great. I love Kendra Miller that they got. I love Jamal Williams that they got. And if Mike Thomas looks healthy, he could be great as well. I will say I do not like their coach. I think he's a bum. I thought they very much underperformed last year, and I don't think Carr's the missing piece. Granted, I do think he's a much better quarterback. And then obviously Kamara is missing a couple games. I
But
didn't
it
take
seemed
the
like this.
Saints.
It seemed like the Saints let up a lot of points last year, whereas in kind of years past, their defense has been more solid. Some of
Yeah,
those
I mean,
games.
I think they have the pieces. Cam Jordan's a 10 sack guy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Honey Badger's there. I don't know if he's there or not. I was thinking Marcus May in my head, but I'd have to double check that. But I know that's where Gardner Johnson had been at before. And I mean, they always find pieces. They find guys that are going to step up and make plays. So I think their defense should be okay. I think that division's going to be a lot of solid defense. I think the Bucks are going to be the worst of it, but
Yeah,
I'm
talk a little
excited to
bit
see that.
more. You got to talk a little more about those Panthers because with Bryce Young coming in, I don't, you got to talk a little bit about that a rookie quarterback winning the
Yeah,
division.
so it might be all the people around me, wearing off on me a little bit being here now in Raleigh. But all the Panthers fans around here, I'm buying into the hype. I love Bryce Young. I think he's a stud. Drew Brees did it. Russell Wilson did it. You don't have to be the biggest guy. I know he's listed at 5'10" or whatever. I do think the offense is going to be the struggling part of that team. Their defense, I think, was top 10 last year. I expect them to be great again this year. Um, yeah, I mean, they're going to be solid. So if they can put some points on the board, 22 points a game, I think would be enough to get them to that 10 win mark. 9 to 10 wins is going to win that division. So I'm interested to see who ends up getting it. I think this first week is going to be a huge matchup for the Falcons Panthers
Yeah.
because I do think the Saints should be the best, and I think that they're going to probably compete and win a wild card spot at 10 wins. But I did pick the Panthers to win that. Bryce Young's going to have Thielen as a veteran to throw to. I really like Mingo, but I know his hands. He can drop some passes here and there. They added Hayden Hurst. Miles Sanders is a solid running back. I think just the problem with that team is the offensive line.
Yeah.
So I did end up taking the Panthers. I think Bryce Young's got that dog in him. Panthers went 7-10 last year with a good defense. If Baker Mayfield can make the Browns 500, I think Bryce can take them to 10-7. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
we'll
there's
see how it
definitely a
goes.
solid shot, especially in that division in the NFC. They definitely have a shot to make a run. And new coach, if they can build something special over there around that quarterback, they could have it going over there, especially in that
Yeah,
division. So,
I will say, don't sleep on the Falcons. That defense, what they added with, I don't know, Jesse Bates, Jeff Okuda, was it Calais Campbell that might have gone there, or maybe it was Dupree. I think it was Bud Dupree.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean that defense added some depth over there.
And Ritter's got a little bit
So
of experience now after playing the
yeah,
last, like,
exactly.
what, 4 or 5 games of the last season.
And I don't really love him. I didn't love their draft pick in Bijan. Obviously, the guy's a stud, but you had Algier as a rookie out of BYU last year had 1,050 yards, so I don't see the need to replace that. When you have
Yeah.
Algier, you have Cordero Patterson,
And that was
Drake London,
first round
obviously Kyle
pick,
Pitts.
with the running back issues that everybody's having, picking a
Yeah,
running back in the first round in Bijan is great in Bijan, but you have to get your value for that.
you didn't need a running back, and you could have gotten a Jalen Carter, but instead it fell to the Eagles kind of thing. So I think that was an interesting pick. I do love the Falcons defense. I think that they're going to be right there competing. It's going to be a lot of those close games. Can they pull them off versus the Saints, versus the Panthers, versus the Bucks? I think the Bucks end up being the worst in the division. I do think Baker's a solid QB. I don't think he's too bad. And having Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to throw to never hurt anyone. Obviously, Mike Evans has never had under 1,000 yards, so I expect to see him over 1,000 again. But yeah, I think the Panthers will end up pulling out the division, probably with the same record as the Saints, and the Saints will pull a wild card.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so NFC South, crazy one last year. Panthers, crazy pick for this year. Love it.
Mhm.
Bryce Young, new quarterback, new coach. Now let's move to the NFC North, where we have another debacle. Aaron Rodgers is
Yeah.
gone. Does that leave this thing just wide open for the Vikings to just run it, or what do we got here?
See, I'm looking at everyone taking the Lions, and the Lions I think will be good. I think obviously everyone loves Dan Campbell. I think that's great for him. But I also think they got a couple guys. I think 4 guys got suspended for betting, and Jamison Williams is one of them. And I think he was going to be a big addition for them on the offense this year. Obviously, they got David Montgomery's a solid running back that came from Chicago. Jameer Gibbs they drafted at 12 or something and shocked the world going him that early. I do think the Vikings are going to take the division though. They won a bunch of close games last year, but I think it ended up being 13 wins or something crazy like that. I don't think that they're going to be a true great team. But I mean, they got, what is it, Jordan Addison next to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. And then Madison, every time he's needed to fill that role for Cook, he's always stepped up. I think they'll end up winning the division probably about that 10 win mark, maybe 11. I think the Lions are going to be fighting right there at 10 wins with them
Do you think
here,
the
but
Lions have a shot at a wild card then, if they
I
don't win the
do.
division?
I think the Lions could make a wild card. I could very well see them end up going 9-8 or something like that again. I do love Amon Ra. I think that's great. I love Sam Laporto as their draft pick out of Iowa, I believe this year. He's a tight end. He's solid. Jameer Gibbs is solid. David Montgomery's solid. Jared Goff, I think, is in a good system for him. We'll see how the
It
defense
feels like
does.
they're definitely building around Goff, and their defense is going to be a huge question mark over there. So
Yeah, and I love Aiden Hutchinson. I think the guy's going to be a machine, but who knows what their defense will do. I'm going to take. I think I'm going to have the Lions miss the playoffs and just give a 10-win season to the Vikings winning it. I think the Bears will be an upgrade from last year. I think they started hot and then lost like 12 in a row, or I don't know, something crazy to end the year. I think they maybe get up to the 7-win area. I could see them going over it. I could see them a little under it. The Packers, I think, are going to be an interesting question. I do think Jordan Love's going to ball. I don't think the defense is that good anymore. They had the Smith brothers at one point, and now it's just all over the place. Their line's still okay. I think they still got David Bakhtiari in their center. Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon are decent, but it's going to be a lot of is Romeo Dobbs, is Christian Watson good enough
Yeah.
with Jordan Love? And I do think they got what is it? Luke Musgrave was the tight end
Yeah.
as
And how are
well.
those young guys going to perform against some of these vets that have been in the league for 12 years, you know?
Yeah, so it's like the pressure's going to go onto them. They're younger. They kind of had some drops. I know Christian Watson's first play last year on the bomb, like dropped it, and
Mm-hmm.
if they could win, what was it, 8 games not last year with Aaron Rodgers, I do think Jordan Love will be solid, but I don't expect them to do very good. I think that'll be the worst part of the division, maybe 4 or 5 wins.
Okay. Eagles, Cowboys, Washington Commanders, and the New York Giants. How do you think
Yeah.
this plays out for these 4 teams?
So I think I'll start with the Commanders. I think their defense is phenomenal. I think they'll be great. They'll show it against the Cardinals, I think.
I think
I think
their
that they have
defense
great
is super
weapons.
sleeper. Like this season specifically, like it feels like they have the pieces. And last season they were good. I didn't think they had the coaching to kind of put it all together. But I think Ron Rivera now with some experience with knowing who his quarterback is going to be, it's going to be a much better season for them.
Yeah, see, I'm not expecting them to do very good. I think they'll be the bottom of the division. I do think that they had the potential to do good. I wanted them to go make a trade for Lamar just as a fan. I think that would have been phenomenal having Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, um, Jahan Dotson. They drafted
Mm-hmm.
last year, I think. But the offense has all the weapons. I think the defense is solid. I think the QB is the missing part. I think Howell's going to be solid, but in that division, I think it's going to be too tough with the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys.
It feels like to me that they're just going to be one of the teams to get behind the ball, meaning they're just going to lose like 4 or 5 early games, and then they're
Yeah,
just going to be playing catch up, and they'll get to 500 or a game under 500 or something, but it's just going to be a long battle throughout the season for them.
yeah,
But who knows?
yeah. So
That's just my
I think
guess.
they'll be the bottom. I'm interested to see the Giants as well. For some reason, they won a bunch of close games last year. I think they're going to do worse this year. It makes no sense. Their team got better. They added Hyatt as a receiver. He's a stud. They added Waller, who's stud tight end. Saquon got at least a 1 year extension. They added Cole Beasley. They added I think it was one of the receivers, who was it? One of the receivers from the Colts.
Yeah.
And then if they have Shepard and Slayton healthy, they'll both get hurt again. They always do. It'll be interesting. Danny Dimes has been getting some hype, so it'll be interesting to see what they do.
He
I love
definitely
Brian
got paid.
Dayball. Yeah,
Danny Dimes got himself some
yeah,
money.
45 mil or something was insane. But I do like their defense. I mean, Dexter Lawrence is a dog up front. Kayvon Thibodeau next to him. The team's solid. Xavier McKinney's going to have to step into his role this year. I think he's a third-year player now from Bama, and we'll see how they do. I don't expect them to be great. Cowboys defense, it's going to be phenomenal. They were phenomenal last year. Dan Campbell does a great job. I think they're going to be competing for that 12 to 13 win range. Obviously, I think they'll go 1-1 probably with the Eagles. 1-1 with either the Giants or Commanders, but Dak owns the East. So I do think it'll be interesting to see how the Eagles do. I think they'll start off with a tough battle going into play Bill Belichick's Patriot
Yeah.
defense. Obviously, you got Ramondre Stevenson, Zeke's over there now backing him up. The offense isn't going to be, I don't think, too great, but I think the defense is going to put up a fight to start the year. Eagles, I think, will be right around that 12-13 win range. And because of the fact that no team has won the division back-to-back years for about 20 years, I want to lean the Cowboys, but I think this is the year it breaks, and the Cowboys, Eagles both end with the same wins, and Eagles get the nod.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I mean, it feels like that those two teams are kind of going to be the leaders, it feels like, to win the NFC. They're the most complete teams with the Niners. The other divisions are just, kind of big question marks. So it's going to be tough to tell who's going to be able to make that run in the NFC. But let's
Yep.
transition to the AFC. The AFC West is Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, and Broncos. Always a super interesting division. There's always, it feels like always 3 teams that are good out of the 4 in that division. Sometimes even 2 of those teams making the wild card spots. So what do you think is going to happen in that division?
So I do think that one team is going to come out of the division, maybe two for the playoffs. I think two of them are going to miss it. I think the Raiders will miss it. They'll be the worst of the bunch. I do love, Jimmy G's a winner. I don't think he's a great QB, but he's got Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfro. They added, I think it was Kendrick Bourne. They have Michael Mayer out the draft. Josh Jacobs got paid. The offense should be rolling. The defense has Crosby and Jones, but I don't think it's going to be good enough in the division. The Broncos, I think, will probably be like right there with the Chargers. Trying to see if they can make the playoffs. And I think Russell Wilson's going to get to be more like himself. Sean Payton's a winner. Their defense was phenomenal. I think if they scored 20 each game last year, they would have won like 13 games.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they do. I do not have them making the playoffs, but I would not be shocked to see them in it. Chargers as well. I think I had it 11-6, but missing the playoffs. Just with how tough the AFC is, I do think they got a little bit better. Kellen Moore I do think fits the scheme. It's really just going to be a matter of if their defense can stay healthy with, Khalil Mack up front. J.C. Jackson got hurt last year. Their defense on paper should be good. They have the talent, but now can they put it together is going to be interesting. And then obviously the Chiefs you can't count out. I don't think that they're nearly as good as they usually are. They let Frank Clark go. Juan Thornhill is a big piece of the secondary. They obviously don't have Juju or true wide receiver one, in my opinion. We'll see how the running back goes with Pacheco and McKinnon, and if Clyde even gets a chance to play anymore, we'll see. But I think they're going to have a worse year than usual, maybe 12 wins, but I think that's going to be good enough to win the division. And if they don't win the division, they might not make the playoffs because I like the other AFC teams a lot.
Yeah, definitely the AFC's loaded. Okay, let's move on then. AFC South, another interesting division. Jaguars, Titans, Texans, and Colts.
Yeah, so the Colts, Anthony Richardson's a bum. They got him at 4. I didn't even think he was going to go in the third round, and then all the hype after his, he's got the talent to be phenomenal, but he can't complete a pass. I watched him twice. One was versus Florida State when it mattered most last year, and I think he went 9 of 27 that game. Like the guy cannot throw a football straight. So now not paying Jonathan Taylor, but paying $50 million to move a whale across the country is cool. Jonathan Taylor's, four games on the PUP list now, so he won't be playing to start the year. They'll be terrible. Probably trying to get Marvin Harrison, Jr., I guess, to fill his dad's old shoes. Titans, I think I was mentioning earlier, I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I do think they'll be right around 500, at least competing with the Jags for the division. Jags should walk away with the division. Trevor Lawrence obviously had him at 10 wins, I think, last year, and they won it. Adding Calvin Ridley is going to be huge. The guy is incredible. And I mean, just his footwork is great. His cuts are so quick. And
he'll be back and he'll be ready to play.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Travis Etienne does because I do love Tanks Bigsby, and I think if he gets a chance, Travis Etienne might lose a spot. So we'll see how that goes.
Could end up going running back too.
Yeah, I think he should, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so AFC North now. We got the Steelers, Browns, Ravens, and Bengals.
That is the best division in football, I will say right now.
Yeah.
I have the Ravens winning the Super Bowl this year, and that's hard for me to admit because I'm not a Harbaugh fan, not really a trusting guy in Lamar Jackson and his health, but something's telling me it might be the Ravens' year, and it might be OBJ, it might be Nelson Aguilar. Could be Zay Flowers because the guy is a stud. I think they're going to win that division with 14 wins and do kind of what the Eagles did last year where they get home field in Baltimore and, they're going to have some tough matchups in the AFC all the way through the playoffs. But I think with Lamar being able to show that he can run the football and throw it with all the weapons that they have around him, obviously Mark Andrews is a stud. They're going to need some health at running back, whether it's J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards or whoever it's going to be for them. I think the Ravens will be phenomenal.
Yeah, I watched that Zay Flowers video on Twitter of this whole signing bonus. OBJ's reaction, that was great. It seems like they're all going to be able to rally around him, so it'll be cool to see kind of those first 2 weeks. You're going to get to know Zay Flowers pretty quickly, I think. So it'll be cool to see it kind of develop.
Yeah. If I had him on fantasy, I'd put him in week 1. That's all I got to say. I think he's going to be great. I think they're going to get the ball to him early. Obviously, try and work OBJ back in there. Nelson Aguilar is not a scrub, so he might have a couple weeks that go, where he's the guy that steps up, and Mark Andrews is consistent if he can stay healthy as well. So that'll
Hmm.
be a fun team to watch. Lamar, obviously, a dual threat. I think this year we see him throw the ball. Maybe we'll see him hit 4,000 passing yards or something
Yeah.
like that.
And
I know he
then
made a
how
comment
many
about
throwing,
6, but
running? How many
yeah,
running?
he'll run for close to 1,000. I think at least over 700, 800. But yeah, the rest of the division's phenomenal. I love the Steelers. I had them at 11 wins. I mean, with T.J. Watt healthy, Kenny Pickett looks good. Deontay's a beast. George Pickens is the man.
Yeah, that
Allen
defense
Robinson,
is going to be
yeah.
incredible, though. It's just tough to look at the Steelers and go, how are you going to get past that defense?
And Mike Tomlin, I mean, it's what 17, 18 years where he hasn't gone under 500. It's like you have that, and then you have the weapons, Najee or Najee, however you
Hmm.
pronounce it. He's a beast, and then you have Jalen Warren, who might be taking some of his carries this year. He looks more explosive, the same way TP looked for the Cowboys, and so I think they'll be good. I have them
Did they
11 and
did the
6.
Steelers draft an offensive lineman? Because it felt like to me that was one of the big things they were missing last year was they just needed to
Uh,
solidify that O line.
I think they drafted him later on because I know they started out Joey Porter. They got somebody, but then they got Joey Porter Jr. Out of Penn State, the corner, in the early second round. I know they got the tight end Darnell Washington from Georgia, who's the big guy.
Those are such
Uh,
Mike Tomlin picks.
yeah, so they have those. I do think that the line's going to be a little more bolstered. Najee has been 1,000 yard back, even though he's putting a lot of miles on those legs the last few years with how much they give him the ball. Bengals, I think, will be good. It's Joe Shiesty. I originally, as soon as the Super Bowl ended last year, I said it's going to be the Bengals beating the Niners in the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised to see them get back there. He's got Jamar Chase, who might have 20 touchdowns this year. He's got T. Higgins, who's going to have 1,000 yards. I mean, he's got Boyd over there still. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Mixon because I know he was having some issues off the field, and then also if the guy that's behind him, younger guy, a good running back, we'll see how he can do. But the Bengals, I think, will be in the playoffs, but it'll be another wild card situation like it was when they made their run 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Oh,
the
and
last
then I can't
division.
forget the Browns.
Oh
I can't
yeah.
forget the Browns too. Deshaun Watson, coming back to him, I think he's a phenomenal talent, and if he can play like he did with the Texans, they could compete. I just think the division's too tough for them to make any noise.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that division is just going to overwhelm them. I think they're going to lose all those games for sure.
Yeah,
AFC East, biggest question mark for me out of probably any division because you have three of these teams that potentially playoff Super Bowl caliber teams potentially in the Jets, Bills, and
yeah,
Dolphins. Patriots, it
yeah.
feels like are going to have a rocky road this season with the rest of that division. But I mean, you just never know. So, what do you think? Obviously, I'm thinking the Bills, but you never know.
I think the Bills have won it a few years in a row. This year, I'm gonna go with the Dolphins. I think
Okay.
that with Tua healthy, they're good enough to keep winning football games. And so, if he can stay healthy, I think they're going to keep winning football games. They have a lot of talent that they added to the defense. Obviously, Bradley Chubb late in the year last year, and then Jalen Ramsey is
Secondary is
not.
absolutely loaded.
Yeah, you got Holland, you got Jalen Ramsey. Um, they just added Eli Apple, who's not great, but he's not a scrub. And I mean, yeah, that defense is good. It's Tyreek Hill, Waddle, Cedric Wilson, and Raheem Mostert are the four fastest players in the NFL. How are you going to compete with that? How are you going to defend it? I think they sneak out 13 wins, maybe 14 if it's necessary to get that one seed
That many, huh?
or two seed behind the Ravens. They'll be right there, and then right behind them, I have the Bills at probably 12 to 13 wins. They've won the division the last couple years. I do think the team got better by adding Dalton Kincaid. They need to run it more. I wish they went and got Dalvin Cook to I don't think they wanted him to take away his brother's first year being a starter.
Yeah.
But I do think that would have been a good fit if they're going to win it all. I think that they need to focus on running the ball more, not just throwing it, because Josh Allen's body needs to be fresh when they get to the playoffs, and with him running it, it takes a beating on him. But I do think they have a great team, less pressure without being the favorite to win it all this year. The Jets, I think, will be good. Aaron Rodgers, two-time MVP or three-time, I don't even know, 3 or 4 time MVP. He had
Was
back-to-back
back to
backs, I
back.
think.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, like 2 years ago. I mean, the guy is a beast. He's got Garrett Wilson, who's going to be, another breakout this year.
It's
Could
going to
be
be a
one
huge
of the
breakout
offensive
year.
players of the year. And then Brees Hall was on track to be offensive rookie of the year last year until he got hurt. And so you have him and Dalvin Cook and Garrett Wilson, and then you
Robert
have your
Saleh
Allen.
is the coach. He's leading
Yeah,
that
the
defense to be a
defense.
top 5
Yeah,
defense. So
yeah,
it'll be
exactly.
interesting to
So
kind of see how that team develops, because if they can get it together by the end of the year, that's a team that they have the talent and they have the experience to go deep in the playoffs. Not
yeah,
necessarily they have like the whole team camaraderie, all this and that, but with bringing in Rodgers, he's going to be able to lead some of these younger guys. The defense is
yeah,
much more experienced. It feels like they got some 4 or 5 year guys in there that really know what they're doing. They got Saleh teaching them and leading them. So I'm interested to see kind of. I think in that division, there's a good shot that 3 of those teams end up making the playoffs, and being
yeah. Those
over
three that
10
we're
wins.
talking about. Yeah, those three we're talking about: Dolphins, Bills, Jets. I ended up having all three making the playoffs between 12 and 14, maybe 11. But I did give them Jets the nod at the 12th win because I had them passing the likes of the Broncos, the Chargers, the Steelers, who I do think will have 10 to 11 wins. But someone's going to have to not make it. So I did give the Jets and then Bills and Dolphins a nod to get in there.
Right on.
And then the Patriots are Bill Belichick. They're going to have a top seven defense, maybe top five. They always do. Um, so we'll see what they do. Gesicki, Hunter Henry, Ramondre Stevenson, Ezekiel Elliott. I think they're going to let Mac Jones kind of open it up, air it out a bit more this year. So we'll see. If the receivers are good enough. I know Juju went over there, but yeah, just with how tough that division is, maybe a 6-win season. I'm sure Belichick will probably find a way to get more than that. But with that division being as
They're
tough as
gonna
it
have to
is, I
go
don't see
find
too much.
themselves a quarterback next year. I think Mac Jones. It
They're
sounds
gonna,
like is a little full of himself.
yeah, they might need a Drake May or maybe trade up for Caleb Williams, or we'll see. We'll see how everything
They
pans
could be a
out.
surprise tank of the season to go get Caleb Williams. I could see that happening for sure, and I could see him wanting to go and play for a winner like Belichick. So you never know.
Yeah, we'll
so
see. That defense is too good, and Belichick doesn't lose, so we'll see.
So yeah, how about since we just finished talking about the AFC East, AFC Championship game, 2 teams. I mean, obviously, got the pick of the litter in the AFC. You got all these teams you can choose from. What are the 2
Yeah.
you got in the AFC Championship game?
So championship game, I really do feel like it could be the Bills' year. However, because of the Madden curse, I can't put them. So I do think it's going to be the Bills and the Ravens playing each other. And I think people are sleeping on the Ravens defense. I think that they're phenomenal. They shut down the Bengals in the playoffs and almost beat them with Tyler Huntley. Obviously, they lost a little bit of depth, and the corners is kind of the question mark. So we'll see how they do. But being able to throw it and run it for Lamar, having the weapons he does, I think is going to be too much to overwhelm the Bills, who really, I think we'll get into a 2-target system. I know people always talk about Gabe Davis, but I do think Dalton Kincaid's going to be great. So it'll be interesting to see Diggs and Kincaid get going. Gabe Davis is a solid third option. But like I said, if they don't run it, I don't think they're going to be able to make it to the big game. And so I did take the Ravens over the Bills. It's hard to not have Joe Shiesty there with the Bengals because I do
Yeah,
love the Bengals, and I could see the Bengals winning it all this year. Like it's just too tough. I do think the Bengals or Bills knock out the Chiefs early. It could be the Jags as well. Like those teams just have too much talent.
yeah. I'm seeing Bengals and Bills for sure. Like those are the 2 teams that just ring everything for me,
Yeah,
because I don't I can see the Bengals losing a few games during the season like they have. But I think that when it comes to postseason time, that team just knows how to flip the switch, and they're going to be able to just play good football. When it comes to the time to do so, it's going to be those last drives of those games, and they're going to have to go win games. And I think that Joe Burrow is going to be one of those guys that you got to keep the ball out of his hands. So we'll see
yeah.
how that kind
It's
of
gonna.
goes through the season.
They can't do what they did last year, starting 0-3, maybe 0-4, because that's not going to cut it this year with
No.
how tough it is. But I do think that Browns game is going to be a big one. I don't know yet if Joe Burrow's playing or not. Obviously, they need him.
He said today, I
I
think that
think he's
he's
going
ready to
to.
go. Yeah, I think he said today
Okay.
somewhere. I think I saw that he's ready to go, but I'm not too sure on that. Regardless, I
Yeah.
mean, it's Joe Burrow. He's going to play, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, week 1,
But
they got the Browns. It's away. I think Joey B's playing, so we'll see. But
yeah,
yeah,
I think
and
that'll
then
be a close game.
NFC Championship game. Who do you think is going to end up making it with the Eagle?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the thing is I think that depending on the matchups, I for some reason I feel like the Cowboys are going to get there, even though I don't think their team's good enough to win it all. I'm kind of seeing Bills Cowboys, but just because of how good I think the two teams are, I do think it will be the Niners and the Eagles. Um, Somehow, if the Cowboys can match up with the Eagles, like
It's
I
pretty
said, if I
hard
get the
not to
nod,
have those two teams again. I mean, after that game last year, it just feels like the Niners are going to be on a revenge spree to get that game back where they didn't have a quarterback
yeah,
with an arm, a functioning arm, I
yeah,
should say. And then
yeah,
and
exactly,
then the Eagles are going to be looking for that game back in the Super Bowl, obviously, because they had a
yeah.
10-point lead or so, in the third
Mhm.
quarter or something like that, and
Yeah,
ended
I
up
do think the
managing to
Eagles
lose
also lost. They do. The Eagles did lose a little bit of depth too at defense, which I think
in the
might end up hurting them
secondary,
in the
right?
long run. Yeah, but even up front, they gave Hargrave went to the Niners,
Yeah,
and then the linebackers kind of just let him walk, and they're going to give Nakobe Dean a shot, which I think he's a stud, and Jordan Davis a shot, and then obviously they drafted three Georgia guys in the first round or
hmm
second round. So
So Niners
yeah,
and Eagles and Ravens and Bills. What does that lead you
those,
to in your Super Bowl?
yeah. So I think Niners, I think I have as the one seed. They're going to be at home. The stadium's going to be rocking. Obviously, being in California, we know all the Niner fans that'll be there.
Die Hard
So
Niner fans.
yeah, and I mean, I don't necessarily love Brock. I think he's a good quarterback, but they didn't have enough film on him last year to be able to match up against him. I think Darnold would be able to lead them all the way. I do think Brock could get there, but if he gets there, I think they lose it. If Sam Darnold's there, I think they win it all. But I do have the Niners beating the Eagles this year. And then I have the Ravens, like I said, beating the Bills. And then over the top, I have the Ravens. Uh, Niners kind of rematch like we had a Harbaugh Bowl, 10, 11 years ago. But I do think the Ravens' ability to have the MVP in Lamar Jackson, I think he will be the MVP this year.
Maybe
And I
this year
think
they won't have to shut the lights out.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for the Niners to have a chance to come back, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But both teams have a solid defense. Like I said, the Ravens I think is a little underrated. Lamar's got weapons this year, and just being a dual threat like he is, I think that'd be too much to overcome as a Niner fan.
Yep.
So
Sounds good. Yep. I think that's pretty clear. Super Bowl choices. I would go probably Bengals or Bengals or Bills are the two that I have in the AFC. So I'm thinking probably Bengals and Eagles for this
yeah,
year.
yeah, I
Chiefs,
like that.
Chiefs.
I like that
Obviously,
too.
it's
Yeah.
tough not to have them in there, but it just feels like
It's hard to
maybe
go
not
against
this
Mahomes,
season.
but
Yeah, maybe not this
yeah,
season. They'll be back next season. They'll pick up a draft pick, maybe a couple players off the free agent market, and then be able to go from there and kind of pick up from where they left off.
yeah. So week one, kind of looking at it, I do like the Jaguars. They're playing the Colts, who don't have a running back, don't have a QB. The line was at 5, which is kind of weird to me, but I do think the Jags should be able to cover that. The Patriots plus 4.5. I don't know if the lines moved much since I last looked at it, but being at home versus the Eagles, I think it's going to be a tough match. Obviously, I think the Eagles are a great team, but Bill Belichick's going to be ready week one. The defense is great. I think they're able to cover. And then the Commanders, I love. The Cardinals are tanking. They don't give a crap. And I don't think Sam Howell's the best QB, but I think Washington has enough defensively and weapons offensively to get the job done to cover 7 points. There's a couple games I don't really want to touch. Like I mentioned, I like the Steelers to upset. I like the Titans to upset. Titans at Saints, Steelers at home versus the Niners. Um, and yeah, we'll see how things go. I think the Browns keep it close and probably cover the 3 against the Bengals as well. I would not be surprised to see the Browns win.
Well, there you
But yeah,
go. Browns maybe covering over Joey Burrow. All right.
running the football. Nick Chubb's a beast, so
Week
we'll
one,
see.
here we go. We're in for a roller coaster.
Week one,
So
we are ready. But yeah. So
sounds
what about
good.
UFC? What do you got for us this week?
So yeah, I do watch an avid amount of UFC. I've been kind of paying attention. I'd like to do a few picks here and there, but I think for our show, I'm gonna just try and stick with like my 3 favorite picks of the week, just because there's 12 fights every week. This week it's in Australia, so there are a lot of Australian fighters. If I'm looking to bet UFC, I'm looking obviously at these Australian fighters to win because they're at home in their home country. A lot of them are going to be laying favorite numbers, but you can pick up good pricing in the overs. I think that a lot of these fights are going to go over. Even though they're in Australia, they have a lot of tough opponents, and I think a lot of them will end up being decisions. But the main fights that I have that I wanted to talk about are Justin Taffa and Austin Lane. It ended in a no contest. And Tafa is a minus 240 favorite. He has gigantic knockout power. I think that he is going to be able to get it done inside the distance here against Lane. Lane's really good with his movement, but I don't think that his striking is going to be able to give him the power to be able to outpoint Tafa. And if Tafa is able to land even just a big jab or something, he'll be able to get on top of him and finish him. So that's kind of what I'm predicting with Tafa and Lane. So I would take the minus 238 for Justin Taffa, and if you can, I would take the fight to end inside the distance. The next fight that I really liked on this card is Tai Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov. Alexander Volkov is a minus 200 favorite on this card. He's the number 7 and Tai is the number 6. I think he's minus 200 favorite because he's kind of got the length advantage against Tuivasa and the wrestling advantage against Tuivasa. But the thing about Tuivasa is he's one of those fighters that he's kind of hit and miss, but he's always got that dog mentality. So, and with the last him coming off a loss, I just don't see him losing a fight at home in Australia. And Volkov, he's kind of towards the later parts of his career. So I think this is going to be kind of one of those fights that
Got
he's
the
starting.
underdogs. All right.
Yeah, he's starting to look out the door. So I'm seeing actually Tuivasa as a favorite in my opinion. I think that it's not really lined well in this specific fight. I think that if Tai does end the fight in the first round, it's going to be TKO, no doubt. There's not going to be a submission. If Tai wins, it will be in the first or second round. He will TKO him and knock him out, or either jump on him, whatever it is, he's going to finish him with strikes. If Volkov wins, it's going to be a decision. It's going to be a 3-round war where Tai's face is going to be all bloodied up, and it's just going to be based on damage, and it's going to end up where his face is not going to be as bloodied and bruised up as Tai's, and he'll end up winning a decision.
Like an underdog. We'll have to see how that goes and come back
So
to
yeah,
it next week.
I would personally take the plus 164 underdog money with Tai Tuivasa. And if you really want to get ballsy, I'm sure you can get crazy good odds on a round 1 or round 2 knockout somewhere in the sports books. So I'm thinking Tai Tuivasa round 1, round 2 knockout, or Volkov decision. Some sportsbooks may have the special plays as well, where you can get lines like that. But if you wanted to lay like a plus 500 and then minus 150, you can get some good money there on both those bets. And then the last one is Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland. For some reason, I don't know what it is. I just see this fight. Izzy keeps saying he's just going to knock him out and it's going to be over, but I just don't see it going that way. I see this as a full 5-round fight. I don't think that the minus 600 or plus 440 is either one is the play. I think that Sean Strickland, I don't really think he has much of a chance in this fight, and I think that number is pretty reasonable. Izzy just beat his mega foe that had beaten him 3 times before, and I think he's coming off the most confidence he's ever had in his career. So I think that this is just going to be kind of his display of 25 minutes of dominance. I don't think he knocks Strickland out. I think Strickland just kind of has the chin to just take all his punches, and he's just going to try and make it a dogfight, but Izzy's just going to be dancing around him in the ring, hitting him, touching him up, bruising him up. And then at the end of 5, it's just going to be an easy decision for Israel Adesanya. I think the absolute lock is over 3.5 rounds. I don't think there's any chance that we don't see a 4th round. Definitely 4th round starting. Like if you can get good money for 4th round to start, I would definitely take that. But I can easily see this fight going to decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if Izzy is on the other end of that. So those are my picks for UFC. I got Izzy by decision. I got Tai by either knockout in round 1 or round 2, or Volkov by decision on that fight. And then I got Tafa by knockout against Austin Lane after the no contest.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, that's gonna do it for our first podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys could all like, subscribe, and comment, let us know what you'd like to see, and just kind of more things that we could do better. Equipment that we could make better, things that would make just the podcast easier for your guys' viewing pleasure. That would be great.
I think we are going to get to I do think we'll get to some baseball maybe come playoff time. I don't know if we're going to talk much about it up until then.
That's a good point.
Braves Dodgers obviously look like huge favorites, but coming out the other side, I mean, the Rays look good, Orioles look good, but we'll get to baseball, maybe some soccer, Premier League, Champions League, MLS. Obviously, Inter Miami having Messi is a big topic to talk about. We'll get to those, I think, another time. But yeah, let us know what you guys want to hear, whether it's football, basketball, UFC, soccer, baseball, you name it. We're here to talk about it, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Like you said, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right, thanks, guys.